All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Sorry for our Zoom difficulty there. There is closed caption available if you go to the bottom of your screen with the little closed captioning icon. We do have a closed captioner typing this up as we go. Also, the chat has been disabled, but the Q&A function works. If you have questions for any of us, please let us know through the Q&A. You should not be able to unmute yourself or turn your video on, but you can type through the Q&A. Several of our panelists who you'll hear speak are on there, and some of our residents are on also. And we'll talk a little bit later. We're also planning to have a more resident-oriented Q&A and get-together available for you in the near future. Brittany, we'll go ahead and go on. So I'm Alan Harsman. I'm the General Surgery Program Director. This is kind of what we're going to talk about for the next roughly 2 hours or so. We can go on to the next slide. So the aims of our program are listed here. Every program, residency program in the country has aims that they've identified. And so the different types of programs and different programs specifically will have different things they're trying to produce in a resident or goals for their program. So our goal is to create surgeons with excellent interpersonal and clinical skills, ethics, and judgment by training them as leaders, educators, and problem solvers who understand research and clinical care and go on to create new knowledge. And so within that sort of first couple statements is sort of wrapped up an overall goal of creating leaders in academic surgery. And that's really kind of how we envision our program specifically and differentiate it from other programs. And obviously we want our graduates to achieve their certification and their professional and personal goals throughout their whole career. So when we look at applications, this is a question we get a lot, and we've tried to build the topic today based around questions we've seen, we've heard from you all directly and seen on the internet and in previous years. So when we look at applications, this is what we look at. And so we do look at USMLE scores, step 1 and or step 2. We look at your letters, we look at your leadership experience, extracurricular activity, research experience and productivity, and some of your grades that we think are particularly relevant to the practice of surgery. And we do look at your personal statement. Now, part of how we do this, and many of you were evaluated by holistic review when you started medical school, and you can see the AAMC's sort of experience attribute metric model that they use to describe holistic review. And most of you were taken into medical school that way, and we've been doing, to the best of our ability, that for our residency for the last several years. And so while we do use USMLE scores, they're weighted similarly to some of these other things. And so we tend to weight things like research and leadership, which is what we're trying to train in the end, because we think past performance will likely suggest people that are able to take advantage of our program. Some questions that do come up, we do interview and hire osteopathic physicians, international medical graduates, US graduates from all over the country, not specifically to the Midwest or any other region. And we do hire people with below average USMLE scores. So part of the reason we don't get into publishing exactly what we think of as a good USMLE score is because every year we hire some people below that or with scores below that who excel in some of these other areas. So I came here in 2007, looked at several different jobs. I moved from residency and fellowship in Dallas to Ohio State. And it's really, to me, the people that work here and the opportunities here. It's a great institution, and we'll talk to you some more about that, with great people and a lot of opportunities. And I think those are the same reasons that you should come here or consider it, are for those same opportunities. You go back one, Brittany. You know, when you think about this process, you think about like, where are we now? We need to go back to those big red blocks, sorry. And what's coming next, which is sort of the match. And from there, you go through a residency program and turn out to the rest of your life. And when you look at residency programs, I think what you would look for are in my personal order, and other people order this differently, the people, the training and the exposure, and then the facility itself and the institution as a whole, and then sort of where you're going to live. Obviously, you don't want to live somewhere that you really don't want to live. But I do think some of these other things are also important. And certainly when it comes to city and lifestyle, also where the rest of your friends and family live is a big factor. And those things end up producing kind of you and your career. You can go on to the next one. So our faculty has grown quite a bit. Last year, the number at the top of the slide was 91 clinical faculty. Now it's 102. And as you look, they're very well spread across all these different areas. All these different divisions that you need to rotate in are housed within our institution and Nationwide Children's Hospital downtown. And we have quite a few faculty in each of those. We're not dramatically outweighed in one versus another. And there's also another 17 full-time research faculty within the department itself. When you look at our NIH funding for the last several years, you can see really quite a bit of growth. There's a Blue Ridge ranking, which basically ranks departments of surgery across the country by total NIH dollars. And we've moved up, in the last 10 years from number 29 to number 5. You can go on to the next one there, Brittany. This is for this year. The rankings are not out this year. They actually don't come out until much later in the calendar year. But our NIH funding overall is at about $18 million this year, which will most likely leave us in as number 5 in the country in terms of departments of surgery funded by the NIH. You can see our total funding is $24 million. And if you look at that the diagram on the right, most of the money that we have in terms of research is NIH money. And I think the importance of that for an applicant is that that tends to come along with good training money. It tends to support T32 training grants. It tends to support diversity supplements to an existing R01 grant and various types of options for you as trainees. And we've got obviously several grant applications that people have submitted this year in the boxes on the left. We can go ahead, Brittany. So when you look at the website and other information about Ohio State, you'll see a variety of locations and what sounds like a lot of locations. The reason the two pictures at the top are mashed together like that is basically that's how the buildings go. The cancer hospital is on the left, then the heart hospital, University Hospital, then the brain and spine hospital. Also on this same campus, but not quite attached, to the psychiatric facility and the rehab hospital. And the bottom left there is Ohio State University Hospital East, which is, we are basically on the northwest corner of downtown. OSU East is on the northeast corner of downtown, and the Children's Hospital pictured there in the bottom is on the southeast corner of downtown. So all pretty closely located, about 10 minutes in good traffic, and most of the time in Columbus, there's good traffic. So when you look at our rotations, these are the rotations that you would do as a resident. I've highlighted a few that are unique. Our residents as interns do ICU, as many do around the country. We do have night float for first and second years. So you do Sunday through Thursday nights for 4 weeks, which means much of the rest of the year you don't have weekday overnight call. We have an HPB service specifically sort of broken out from our surgical oncology services. And we do pediatric surgery as an intern and again later. You can go on, Brittany. Second year rotations include a burn service. We have burn and transplant here in-house. You do all those here. Again, do night float, like I said. OSU East is our general surgery rotation over there, and you take home call, and so you start taking that as a second year. We've also added this year an endoscopy rotation specifically for the second year to get better endoscopy experience, do the FES training, and some other requirements. Third year, the rotations tend to get a little bit longer. We do have a vascular surgery apprenticeship model at OSU East also for a third year resident. You can go on to the next one. And the fourth and fifth year rotations, the ones I've highlighted are apprenticeship model based. So acute care surgery trauma is much like a service around the country. Do vascular surgery as a fourth year, which allows you to take fellow call and basically alternate with the fellows for big emergency vascular cases. Do surgical oncology 2 different times in 2 different apprenticeship services, and do an elective, which is if you're going to do global surgery, that's where you would do it. Some people do cardiac. We've got some people doing abdominal core health and colorectal and different types of electives. The PGY5, as I said, these are the ones that are highlighted in red, are the apprenticeship style services, and fairly traditional for programs across the United States. So this is our operative volume, or a little bit of information about it. That table on the left is put out for every program in the country. The middle sort of thin black line is the median. And you can see for many things we're above the median, for a few things we're below the median. When you look at some of those things that are kind of farther to the left, like total breast cases, I think part of that has to do with our tertiary experience. You do plenty of breast surgery, but not as much as some people elsewhere in the United States in different types of programs. Colonoscopy is readily available, but our residents in the past have had not trouble getting them, but just trouble making time to get down there. And so that's part of the reason we've added that endoscopy rotation. All of your endoscopy here is done with surgeons. All the colorectal surgeons and most of the GI surgeons here have dedicated endoscopy time every week. And so we do a lot of endoscopy in the department, and that's all done with us. You can see, I pulled these numbers just as an example. This is our interns kind of midway through last month when basically all their intern cases are logged and not much else. And you can see they're well over 100 cases. One of the interns did have, a rotation that happened to be more affected by COVID. We were not shut down, but limited the number of cases we did from mid-March really through June 1st. And depending on kind of what on rotation you are, that hits your case numbers more or less hard. But that person will finish with tons of cases anyway. You can go ahead. So this is something that Dr. Amira will talk about a little bit later. I think we have a great robotic training experience, and this is a little bit of the kind of data we can actually pull out of the robotic console for each of you. So this is one of our chiefs who just graduated. These were his numbers midway through last year, and you can see very specific breakdown of what instruments he uses most, how many cases he's done, which even halfway through the year was 98 robotic cases, which is quite a few, and really very specific granular information. After graduation, the vast majority of our residents go on to fellowship. You can see over the years, if you go into private practice, this is about 10 years, maybe 11 years worth of data. If you go straight into academics, the people that go straight into academics tend to be people who did the surgical ICU fellowship during their professional development time. And so they're already fellowship trained and go straight into practice. So this is where our folks have gone to fellowship in that period of time. And you can see quite a spread across basically any fellowship you can think of, and good numbers in each of those. We've actually had really very happy with the success we've had placing people in fellowships in the last several years, especially. So a few things that are a little bit different about our program in terms of benefits. If you get a paper accepted to a national meeting, we do fund at least part of your travel, depending on how expensively you like to travel. And most posters you can travel for. We do also pay for a 4th and 5th years if they don't have any research-related travel to go to a meeting just for the sake of networking. We have a great Ohio chapter of the American College of Surgeons, which provides a local meeting. We have some discipline-specific meetings. There's a Midwest Vascular Society, Ohio Valley Colorectal Society, Columbus Surgical Society, which has an annual research meeting as well. We do provide a sort of textbook loop, and sometimes people spend money on software now, fund that kicks in towards the end of your PGY2 year to allow you to buy loops as you get into more appropriate rotations. We'll talk a little bit more about research experience, but part of the reason it's so integral to our program is we really think it helps you be a better doctor, regardless of whether you go out in your practice and do exactly what you did during your lab time here. We think it's a very important part of your training. So when we hire people, we ask them to expect to do at least a year of professional development time. That's our expectation of what you're going to want to do. It's our commitment that we're going to provide at least a year of that to you. Every once in a while, somebody comes through and doesn't want to do that time. It just doesn't end up lining up with their professional goals. And because it's really oriented towards professional development time, then we don't necessarily require people to do it. But obviously, part of my job as program director is making sure that the numbers work out and that we graduate a consistent number of people every year also. The majority of people during that time get a Master of Science degree. Some, as we said, have done the critical care fellowship. A couple have gotten MBAs, and Master Public Health has also become increasingly popular. We really do basically expect you to get an advanced degree, potentially not if you're in the critical care fellowship, but otherwise that's part of our expectation for your research time, and it provides a backbone and structure that we'll talk about a little bit more later. So it's important to remember, no matter where you go, that residency is an important part of your life. And it's really not just a means to an end. If you try to attack your residency as a 5 to 7 year survival to the end to get to the rest of your life, that's going to be really hard on your emotional health. And we really don't encourage that. So we really strive and I think succeed in having a family-friendly environment for you and for the faculty and for your loved ones. So one thing you may notice about our program, hopefully you'll notice, is that we're a relatively diverse program. You know, if you look back 20 years ago, that was not the case. We were less than half women, or less than really 20% women, and very few underrepresented minorities. And for the last 10 years, we've been doing much better in that regard. We run about half and half men and women, and somewhere between 24 and 32% underrepresented minorities most years. And that's intentional. We can go on to the next slide, Brittany. You know, we recruit for diversity because we think that's important for physicians and surgeons in the United States. We look for diversity of thought, diversity of prior experience. And we think, you know, as you get into your research years, it helps generate a wider variety of new ideas for the health of our country and creates an amplified platform for our work and your expertise to go throughout the nation and throughout the world. We do subscribe to reasonably generous family and medical leave policies. I didn't fix that. PGY1s actually have 3 weeks of vacation now. After that, you get 4 weeks, which is a pretty flexible scheduling. The American Board of Surgery sets some parameters around how flexible your time can be and become board certified. And we abide by obviously all of those rules so that you can graduate and be board certified. And I think we've done a pretty good job of being flexible over the years. Obviously, having a family during residency is tough. There's no doubt about that one way or another, but we do our best to not be something that makes it harder. We have reasonable lactation facilities, which I think are getting better over the course of the years. We have a new building, which Dr. Pollack will probably talk about later. And that building will have, I think, even better lactation facilities. We've been talking with architects about that for a couple of years now. So people often ask about changes we're making. We've actually recently switched from individual faculty of doing evaluations to having each division or service sit down and do a combined evaluation to get a little richer detail after each rotation. We've reinvigorated our mentorship program and made that line up a little bit better with a clinical competency committee meeting so that you meet with your mentor kind of in between those meetings to discuss your progress and what questions and concerns you have. We've taken a lot of feedback from our residents over the last year. We've always done that, but we've really been in a sort of renewed period of that. And the residents really sat down as a group this spring and gave us some very helpful feedback. And then we've got regularly scheduled residency committees, a representative from each class and all the chief residents and myself and the associate program directors and Brittany Campbell, who you see on the line, who's our program manager. And we sit down and talk about resident feedback through that situation or through that committee. So one question we've heard on the internet is kind of what have we done about COVID-19? I'm actually pretty proud and happy of our response to COVID-19. What we did was the faculty started to dial back mid-March quite a bit, right? So we canceled, the governor mandated that we cancel elective operations. And that basically meant that the faculty didn't always have to come in. I spent about half my week at home, working at home, just because I didn't have as many patients in the hospital. And one of my big concerns was to not leave all the residents in the hospital to potentially be exposed while not everyone else was in the hospital. And so what we did was we pretty immediately dialed back to basically half staffing. You know, basically the type of numbers of people that would round on the weekend is what we did every day of the week. And the senior resident on each service helped draw up a schedule of 3 to 5 day blocks at a time, where a few days at a time, those people would come in and round for 3 or 4 days and then go home and do whatever operating there was to do. And that worked quite well. Our number of exposures was pretty low. We did have several people go out on quarantine. As you may or may not have experienced early on there, it was hard to know quickly who was going to end up having COVID-19. And so turns out several people had been exposed to a patient before anyone knew they had it. As that has gotten under control, a number of quarantines has dropped way off. We also started having weekly happy hour on Sunday evenings to talk about what changes we were making for the week ahead, what concerns the residents had, what people were nervous about, for their own health or their family's health, and how we need to change things as a residency. That allowed us to make some changes very quickly. You can see on the bottom there a picture of me passing out goggles. Basically, one evening early on, the residents went to go get eyewear to do cases, and all of the protective eyewear had disappeared from the OR because everyone in the hospital now needed protective eyewear. And so Dr. Brett Hauer, our vice chair for quality, actually also serves as a procurement specialist for the hospital. Basically the next morning or the morning after that had a big box of goggles, which we distributed to all of our residents. So everyone had eyewear that they could use. We changed our policies a little bit about how many people scrub to try to preserve PPE. And we really had only faculty scrubbing and seeing the COVID positive and COVID rule out patients all the way through June 1st, when things really went back to pretty much normal in terms of the census at the hospital, at which point there were just too many people around to not have residency a handful of COVID patients. We actually drew up a whole big plan to staff six ICUs with our residents that we never had to implement. Fortunately, the MICU was always able to staff and contain the COVID ICU patients so far. And you can see our goals at the bottom that we set out when we first started making policies. We can go on to the next one, Brittany.
I don't think all the participants can see since we turned off the chat. There is a question in the Q&A box that we can go ahead and answer, I think. It asks about the PGY1 getting 68 cases that you mentioned because of the COVID hit. And what did we do and what did faculty do to actively ensure that interns going into their second year and through their second year will make up that deficit to ensure their 250 cases?
Yeah, so that will, I think, not be a problem at all. So I've talked with that person a couple times back at sort of in, I think, June, we talked about this. And again, a couple days ago, as I was looking those numbers again, and that person's already booked another 20 or 30 cases just since July 1st. I don't think we'll have any trouble. Our residents last year were up in the 300s in terms of the 250 case minimum. For those of you that may not have heard of it, I don't know how widely it's publicized. Part of it's from the Board of Surgery to try to make sure that you do get operative experience early in residency, which I think is a great idea. You have to have 250 procedures by the end of your PGY2 year. And that's a more generous inclusion than when you graduate. So that 250 includes lines and kind of small, like INDs, things that don't count towards your 850 minimum cases at graduation, but do count towards early procedural experience. And so, yes, we'll continue to monitor that. I check that 2 or 3 times a year. I can run that report anytime I want to and run that. And frequently when there are issues, it's because people get behind in logging their cases. But I think that will not be any problem for that person. Do individual faculty every day work with that person? Not necessarily, because actually, that particular person, I'm very pleased with their progress. I really have no concern about their ability. It's just getting raw numbers. I think they'll do fine. The other issue that's come up or sort of become more clear and more stark over the last several months, as you know, is systemic racism throughout our country. After the death of George Floyd, we held one of our weekly Sunday happy hours like we always do. And we talked about it a little bit then, and we decided what we wanted to do is get together again midweek that week and kind of talk about, do we want to come up with a statement sort of on behalf of the residency? On that statement, I didn't reprint it here, but it's available on Twitter. And obviously, if you're particularly interested, we could send it to you. The residents came up with that. I helped them edit it a little bit, but really the vast majority they came up with. I'm really pleased with it. It's, one of the things that we talked about on that call was not making a statement for the sake of checking the box that we are one of the people or groups that made a statement, that put out a statement that week. And there were a lot of them, as you recall. But really sort of as a way of acknowledge, giving ourselves a reason and a format to reflect on racism and how it affects us and what our commitment is to it. And really acknowledging that all of us are part of this problem and all of us are committed to helping solve it. We did hold a White Coats for Black Lives event that following Friday. So this is basically, we talked on Sunday, we talked on Wednesday about potentially holding the White Coats for Black Lives event. By the end of that call, we'd had actually some other emails, and the medical students had also been organizing it. So the picture there on the right is one of the medical students, and then Ekana Onwuka, one of our chief residents from last year. The two of them led that event and spoke at that event. And you can see there on the bottom left, the picture of everyone gathered on the oval. I was there. There were a lot of us, a lot of faculty and many of our residents there. The dean was there. Lots of different people from the medical school. And one of the things I was personally gratified to see was there were a lot of other people there, not just physicians. A lot of people, a lot of our nurses went. We got our OR cases done. A bunch of us went down together. A bunch of our housekeeping staff were there. People from across the medical center. We've got a, I don't know if you've seen the movie 13th. It's put out by Netflix, but it's available free on YouTube, about systemic racism in the American prison system. It's a good movie. It's very, it's a tough movie, but it's a good one. And we're going to hold a discussion about that with a law professor and panelist of some of our residents and faculty later in September. We can go on to the next one. A few FAQ type things that people tend to ask me on interview day. You know, our 5 to 10 year vision is to continue to grow our program, to adapt to the new hospital that you'll hear about later and the increased volumes that we've seen. One of my personal goals is to move simulation off of, 20 people at a time to more rotation based. Like you're on colorectal as an intern, your job is to learn how to sew down in a little tube. And I think we can make a simulator for that you can do on colorectal, and we don't have to get all the interns together on a Thursday morning. We've talked a little bit about growth. We do have several fellowships because of our growth and because of our expertise that Dr. Obengiasi will talk about a little bit later. Those professional development year is funded half by the department and half by the PI. And the graduate degree is funded, most of them, the majority of them are funded as a benefit for being an employee. So just like I could go take a class for free, you can take a class for free as a resident, and you can take enough of those to make up that Master of Science degree. You'd end up paying the tax because it's a taxable benefit, but otherwise you're not paying a lot of tuition dollars. Occasionally residents do go elsewhere for research, usually for very targeted things about healthcare policy or law, or very specific types of research that aren't offered here, although the vast majority of things you can do here. Our mentorship program, we talked about a little bit. You're paired with a mentor when you start. I meet with them several times a year. And I think it's has been a good program in the past and will be a good program. Weaknesses, I think one of our weaknesses is essentially the size of the institution and the growth of the institution. Acute care surgery, when I started here 13 years ago, was just becoming its own division of trauma, critical care, and burn, and now runs 2 services of about 35 patients apiece and another consult service of another 20 to 30 patients. And so it's gone from not even being its own service to being nearly 100 patients on an average day. And that's because of the growth of the city of Columbus and the growth of our institution, and is a huge opportunity for our residents, but obviously also a lot of work. We can go on to the next slide. So we skipped her intro, but that's okay. Dr. Bumgardner is, Jenny Bumgardner is a transplant surgeon, MD, PhD, who runs our research training program. So she is not able to be here this week. They are away on vacation, but I have her slides, and she and I work on this very closely together, so I'll tell you a little bit about it. We can go on to the next. So really our goal is to provide advanced training for future surgeon leaders, which we've talked about a little bit already. And we've talked about some of the skills that involves with critical thinking, communication, and also being able to participate in professional development activities and research. And, a lot of scientific thinking goes into that critical thinking of how you function as a physician, how you function as a leader, and as a researcher. We break the program in into 3 phases. Phase 1, you might think of as PGY 1 and 2. Phase 2 is sort of research time, and phase 3 is after research time. But the fact that Dr. Bumgardner has these arranged like this to really run throughout the residency program, I think is a huge benefit. Coming up this fall for our new interns and second years that haven't been in the lab yet, we'll have an info session, basically sort of a round robin presentation by various principal investigators to say, hey, this is our lab, and this is why you might want to join us. And this is what former residents have done in our lab. work on developing your curriculum for your advanced degree, for your master's degree, whatever that is. If you're going to be eligible to submit NIH loan repayment program, one of our residents just got that this year, and then do obviously your application to the graduate school. And then phase 2 is really your time in the lab. One of the advantages to this setup is that you don't sort of disappear to the lab for 2 years and then come back to residency. It's really all part of the same integrated program. So you do orientation, very detailed orientation, self-assessment. The James King Award is a travel award that's actually granted based on your presentation of your, almost just of your idea or your very initial results. It's done within the first few weeks of your research time. You have didactics, obviously, for your master's program, your research. We do evaluations during that time. They're very similar to our evaluations during your clinical rotations. And you have an advisory committee. At the end of every year, we have a research conference, the Zollinger Research Day, and we have a graduation awards banquet. And our research presentations and awards are all part of both of those events, which are residency-wide. And then after you come back from the lab, you're finishing those papers, you're revising and resubmitting, you're traveling to present your work, and then you're moving on to do your fellowship applications and pursue your career and get your letters of recommendation, all kind of part of the same process. So there's a few different tracks within the Master's Medical Science program. Obviously, there's an MPH and MBA have their own different tracks, but we've been able to organize several tracks within the master's degree. Obviously, you can do basic and translational science, immunology, things like that. You can do clinical science. We're working on education science, and then health services science, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, all within that same degree program. One thing that's new for the coming year that Dr. Brett Hauer, who I mentioned earlier, the Vice Chair for Quality, is organizing is a resident quality track. So Tejan Shaw, one of our second years, is going to participate in this when he goes into the, now and when he goes into the lab. And again, it's a throughout the residency kind of thing. To work on quality projects, be part of that, to manage some of the resident-specific quality data, participate in departmental quality meetings. And then Dr. Brett Hauer's laid out a great list of reading about quality, reading about leadership and management. And that person will obviously pursue their degree at the same time, as well as the IHI certificate in quality and patient safety, and participate in projects. They're also actually going to go do some, I sort of think of them as away rotations at the American College of Surgeons with the quality group there, with Dr. Clifford Coe and others, for a week or two at a time throughout their training to learn a little bit more detail from them, and obviously be mentored both locally and nationally. The core curriculum of the master's degree has to do with research design and methods, obviously very important, biostats, research ethics, and communication and grant writing. One of the things that I think you'll find in our residents is once they've done this, their ability to communicate their science and communicate clinical science is really phenomenal when by the time they come back from the lab. Really tell a good story, present the research clearly, present it visually clearly, and take off on their career. We have a couple of specific things that Dr. Baumgartner has tailored for surgery residents. So it's not just a general go off and get a master's with everyone else in the graduate school. It's really tailored specifically to surgery residents, a career development course, seminars in practice management with Dr. Sadiani, one of our vascular surgeons, and then some others that you can see there. This is an example of the career development course. Obviously, a busy slide you're not meant to entirely read, but you can see it goes from business of leading research program, time management, social media, surgeon education, taught by several of our senior faculty members. The research training program overall has a pretty detailed calendar. And again, the purpose of this is to show you that it's an integrated and busy program. So every quarter, the research residents get together and present their research to each other. Sort of half and half, second year residents versus first year residents on rotation. But they present, they ask each other questions, they practice responding to questions. Dr. Baumgartner and I are there also, and so we really have a good handle on how things are going in the lab. You can see that the funding support for that I talked a little bit about earlier, but also comes from a variety of T32 grants. The Artist T32 we'll talk about some more in a second. TL1, diversity supplements I mentioned, various society grants like the Society of University Surgeons, and some local grants. Dr. Bumgardner has just renewed this T32, referred to as the Artist Grant. You can see it talks about immune mechanisms to tissue injury repair and replacement, which is intended to be quite broad. You know, most of surgery has to do with tissue injury repair and replacement. And so it's really applicable to a whole variety of different labs, and it's been a great mechanism for funding some of our residents. So in the last 18 or 20 years, our residents have accomplished a lot in terms of research. You know, 56 people have gotten their master's degree, almost 300 publications, and about a half to a third of those are first authored publications. It's like 2.5 first authored publications per trainee. Really quite a bit of accomplishment that the residents have done. We're very integrated into the biosciences graduate program. This is Dr. Jalavan at the bottom, one of our fourth-year residents who just finished her PhD in the last year or so. We have 2 more residents in the lab getting PhDs. We can go on to the next slide, Brittany. Dathe Benison Messon there on the top left and Jing Han right next to him are both in the lab doing their PhDs. We do sometimes have people do 3 years of research. Our vast preference is if you're going to do 3 years, we decide that in advance and you get a PhD. Otherwise, we try to stick to 1 or 2 years. And you can see a variety of labs and mentors that our residents are doing otherwise. On our website, if you type in surgery.osu.edu, it'll redirect you to this, to our department website. If you look under residency and then the research training program, there's a lot more detail about the research training program. Next up, Drs. Dilhoff and Eiferman are going to talk a little bit about the LEAD program, a relatively new program talking about leadership training.
Is this working? Can you hear me? Give me a thumbs up, Alan.
Yeah, it looks great.
Excellent. Welcome, everybody. My name is Danny Eiferman. I'm one of the acute care surgeons, and my partner, Mary, are you there?
There we go. I'm here.
Ah, there we go. Good deal. Excellent. Want to tell you about something that we're pretty proud of that we launched last year. And so, Brittany, are you going to be advancing for us? Excellent. If you can go to the next one. So LEAD is a leadership elective that we started last year that is only for the general surgery electives. And can you hit one more advance, Brittany, because it's got an animation on there. So why offer this elective? Usually when I do this in person, it's a back and forth thing, but we can't do that over a Zoom webinar. But to the left there is an advertisement from 1903 from a guy named Ernest Shackleton, who was the great Antarctic explorer. And this is what he put in there. At that time, he wrote, "Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honor and recognition in case of success." And if we were together, I would ask you, how many people do you think signed up for that? And you'd be amazed, but he got hundreds of applications for that. And so Mary and I rewrote this to be not an Antarctic exploration, but for surgical residency. Men and women wanted, hazardous journey, small wages, many months of long hours, constant chance of bad outcomes, likely blame for unpreventable events, and then honor and recognition in case of success. And so that's how we feel about you guys joining us on your journey to become surgeons. That if you're ready to sign up for this job, then we want to be a part of making you successful. Next slide. So what you're going to learn about here is a resident leadership elective. And one of my favorite quotes is, leadership is a quality, it's not a position. So even though you're going to come in next year as intern, you're going to be a leader. And it's our job not to teach you how to cut and sew, but how to help you professionally advance. Next slide. Next, there we go. So one of the funniest things happened to me when I became an attending is all of a sudden, because I knew the Hinchey classifications or the 5 types of peptic ulcers and how to take out the colon and put it back together, that because I knew all of this stuff, that I must also have skills in effective communication, team building, process improvement, conflict resolution, how to be a good teacher. And the truth is, my training and most of the attendings you're going to hear from today, this was not a part of their formal training. And I learned quickly that roughly 50% of my professional success had nothing to do with my clinical competency. And therefore, we put together this elective for you guys. Next slide, please. So if anybody's ever taken a strategy course, again, if we were in person, we'd go back and forth and ask about it. But there's really only 2 basic tenets of strategy. One tenet is, can you hit it for the animation, please? Is you can be the low-cost leader, which is what Walmart does. We are not interested in being the low-cost leader of residency programs. So your other option, hit the button, please, is you got to have a differentiator. What makes you different than the other guys? And so next slide. This is one of the things that we think we can differentiate ourselves from the other surgical residency programs that you're going to look at outside here. We're going to specifically give you the option to work on those non-technical and those non-clinical skills to set you up to be successful and be professionally leaders in the future. Because again, leadership skills are as important as technical skills for your professional success. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mary.
All right, so how is this set up? So it's organized as our 2 through 5s, including the lab residents. We weren't trying to discriminate against the poor interns. They have a lot of things on their plate on year 1. So that's why they're not in there. And Danny just told you about the program. We do it on a Sunday evening, and we do it at one of our houses just because to kind of facilitate the discussions and being out of work and not having kind of the routine talk at you kind of lecture. So they're at our houses. We feed you, which goes over very well with residents typically. And we usually have it on Sunday evenings once a month. We're pretty strict on time, so people are in and out, and we're not like taking up an excessive amount of time. Next slide, Brittany. They're meant to be interactive. So it's not like Danny and I or some invited lecturer, it gets invited to talk at you, and that's part of being at our houses and such. It's an interactive lesson. It's not that there's never a PowerPoint, but the whole idea is to have some discussion and really get some meaningful skills out of it. Next slide. So this was our last year's topic. So we based these topics on a needs assessment that we gave at the beginning of the year. So every year we'll tailor this curriculum. We kind of have some topics that we know all of us really need work on, but we'll tailor this for the groups as they come through and have some needs that will need to be met. So last year, leadership styles was a big hit. That was the first one. High functioning teams, resiliency in dealing with complications, having difficult conversations, and intro into coaching. That was one of my favorite. How to give a presentation, and then being an effective teacher. And then we got into COVID, so we got into a little bit of a different time here over Zoom, and then graduation in May. Next slide.
So I put some of these next couple slides that we're going to go in through here quickly, but these are the type of topics that we think are interesting and are on our needs assessment. So just to give you some teasers, if you take our course, come here and take our course, we have one on performance improvement. How do you get better? Next slide. What are the 6 different styles of leadership and what should be used in which situation? What are the 3 factors responsible for professional satisfaction? What are the 3 tenets of a crucial conversation? This is one of my favorite ones. When it comes to making decisions, teams are superior to individuals, inferior to individuals, or better than the average, but not as good as the best performer. And again, you have to take the course for us to tell you the answer to these things. I like Dilbert over here, how you develop high-performing teams. That's a huge one. This is one of my favorite sessions to lead because pretty much everything we do is in teams, right? Every time we go to the OR, we're working with the team. Every time we're on service, we're working with the team. So spend a lot of time on this topic. Next one. What is a BATNA? That's one of my favorite things. Again, you have to take the course to learn the answers to these things. I guess you could also Google it. And then one of the things that I spend a lot of time talking with the residents about, not just in this course, but in general, but nobody ever taught me how to cope and how to thrive after bad things happen. There's only one type of surgeon that doesn't have complications, and that's the one that doesn't operate. And so you got to learn how to have post-traumatic growth after bad things happen, and how can you help your colleagues, because we're all in this together. Next one. And now I'll throw it back to Mary for kind of our conclusion.
So after the first year, of course, we wanted to learn what we could do better, and that's important for all of us. And so what we got from last year's group, all of them said they'd participate again, and that they got some value out of the course. 7 of the 9 topics they really liked and will repeat for this year, of course, based on that needs assessment. There were 2 that will replace, and those will use the needs assessment and kind of pick what those will be. And they liked having it at someone at our houses and having dinner. So we will keep those good things. Next slide, Brittany. So next steps. So we'll review previous topics, new topics, so our original part, sorry. Oh, Danny, you got to talk about Blinkist. This is back to you.
No, I forgot. Yeah. So here's some of the stuff that we learned last year is we were doing a review of the previous topics, then a new topic, and then dinner. The group kind of gave us some feedback that do the new topic up front. People like hearing about kind of the new thing, and then dinner and review of the previous topics. We do ask you to keep a journal during there, and this year, instead of writing down what is it you got out of the session, which is what we asked them to do last year, they gave us the feedback of how can I put into action what I learned during this session. For example, on the Teams lecture, going back and joining a rounding team. And then for those of you who are unfamiliar with Blinkist, I love Blinkist. It gives thousands of books that people have gone through and read, all nonfiction, and they give you about 8 to 10 of the best blinks out of there, or the take-home messages of them. I don't think it's realistic to ask you guys to read a whole book before you come to a Sunday evening session. I do think it's realistic to ask you guys to look for 10 minutes on Blinkist and kind of get the gist of what it is that we're going to go over. Back to you, Mary. All
right. So what feedback did we get last year? So LEAD provides the opportunity to learn about leadership and professional skills from successful and respected members of the surgery department in a relaxed and fun setting. 10 out of 10 would recommend. That was one of our PGY 3s. One of our 4s said the LEAD program helped me consolidate key concepts regarding leadership, conflict management, and personal development that are fully applicable to any professional with a leadership role, no matter at what hierarchical level. And that's really all of us, right? Because we're all going to lead a team in some capacity, even if your goal is not administrative. We all lead teams. The LEAD course provided us an opportunity to explore topics essential to becoming a well-rounded surgeon that you're expected to take in by osmosis. And so many surgeons never do a PGY 5. And so this just hits home that like all these skills that we're expected to know all can be learned. We all see the people that are inherently talented at some of these things and we look up to them, but a lot of these skills they're not just inherent skill, they're not just inherent ability. We can teach most of these leadership skills. Next slide, Brittany. So here's our website and application. So if you get on the surgery website, it's on there. So they'll have the topics from last year and ways to get a hold of us. So if you have questions or that aren't answered today, you can of course put it in the chat, or you can email us. We're happy to get back to you.
Awesome. Thank you both very much. Dr. Judy Opalek is going to talk a little bit about health services research. Dr. Hina Santry is one of our trauma surgeons who also helps run this program. It was going to be here, but they had a long list of dead organs that they needed to remove today and traumas, and so she is tied up and not able to join us.
Thank you. I do actually have a couple of slides I'm going to use to reference. I don't know if it's worth me putting them up or not. That's up to you guys.
No, probably not. We can just,
okay.
You just tell us about.
That's fine. So SHARP is the Center for Surgical Health Assessment, Research, and Policy. SHARP is a group within mostly the Department of Surgery that we established in 2018. So it's a relatively new group. We've got a dozen or so faculty from the Department of Surgery, and then some other folks from orthopedic and plastic surgery and biomedical informatics. And we are really focused on health services research, as the title slide implies. Our mission is to empower surgeon scientists to determine the biopsychosocial underpinnings of surgical disease, to measure surgical outcomes, and to test innovative approaches to improving surgical care in Central Ohio and also beyond. And if you're less familiar with health services research, I think we don't generally get as much play as sort of the basic sciences or the clinical trial folks. But health services is really the intersection between sort of, public health and population health. So we look sometimes, based on our faculty's interests, into the sort of individual and local, regional, and system level determinants of surgical disease. But then we also look at, quality, equity, outcomes, and cost effectiveness. And so the health services, like I said, is really the intersection of those pieces, and bringing us together. When we look at our faculty interests, they are quite varied in terms of, examining clinical outcomes sort of straight up, examining health disparities in different geographic, racial, and ethnic populations. We have folks who are really looking at decision analysis and how both patients and providers make decisions. We look at communication between patients and providers and caregivers. So there are really lots of aspects of health services research and outcomes research that we have faculty who are really interested in and encompassing. We also provide staff support. That's really probably the key piece of SHARP on the staff side, is that we have a number of project coordinators and biostatistical analysts who work with our faculty, as well as obviously the residents who are working with those faculty, to make sure that the work is done in a compliant manner, to make sure that we have all of the necessary, IRB documents and data sharing agreements and data sets and all those sorts of things. So participating in SHARP, if you have interest in this kind of research, really provides the support and the infrastructure for success for both trainees as well as our faculty, obviously. And if you are familiar with or become familiar with Dr. Paredes, Dr. Ricci, and Dr. Diaz, when he returns next year, all of them have done some significant work within SHARP as trainees and can tell you a little bit more about it. But essentially what we do is create health services research teams focused on the work that the faculty and the trainees are interested in, and we provide the necessary support to execute those projects so that the faculty and trainees can really be focused on the science, and sometimes the staff can help with a lot of those logistics. The other thing that I just lost my slide. In 2020, so in fiscal year 2020, which was really our second year of being up and running, SHARP faculty and trainees submitted multiple grant applications, something like 55 or so different grant applications. We submitted and received a number of internal awards and honors. Some of our staff are actually getting to the point where they're able to present. And obviously the trainees have been presenting for, all of the time that SHARP has existed. So it's really a critical mass kind of thing where we've brought all these resources together. Last year we had 2 research fellows. That was Dr. Paredes, as well as Dr. Malik, who is in orthopedic surgery. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those. I apologize for the brevity of this presentation. Like we mentioned before, I just found out about this about 3 hours ago and tried to put some information together. I'm happy to talk to you in more detail I'm happy to talk to you about the core faculty and how our processes work and the support that we can provide to trainees, and or any other sort of research related questions or concerns that you might have in my sort of overall role as research administrative director for the department as a whole. So.
Thanks, Jude. That was excellent. That was just right. And thank you for filling in.
Thank you. No problem.
Next up is Dr. Wome, one of our pediatric surgeons. He's actually our sort of lead contact at the Children's Hospital for our residents, is also the program director for their pediatric surgery fellowship program, and the vice chair for global surgery.
Thanks, Alan. Next slide. So I'm going to tell you about our Children's Hospital, our division of pediatric surgery, and I'm going to tell you about your pediatric surgery rotation if you come to Ohio State. So, you know, this is our Children's Hospital, which we built it's almost 10 years now, although we are a very old hospital, almost 100 years old. Next slide. This is actually a video, but you wouldn't know how to play this video, Brittany? Okay, just click next slide. Next slide. Okay, so we are actually, you know, one of the largest children's hospitals in the country. You know, as you can see, we have quite a lot of beds. You know, we get referrals from, you know, all over the country and from many countries. You know, lots of physicians, and one of the largest employers in the city. Next slide. Now, this is really a very important slide because we have a large faculty. You know, 16 faculty. We're one of the largest divisions in the department. But what is really distinctive is the diversity of the faculty. You know, many women, you know, ethnically diverse faculty. And this is very important because if you, especially if you decide to do pediatric surgery, you might be looking for mentors, and it's going to be, you know, a little bit easier for you to find somebody that you can gel with. Next slide. We have a very large trauma program. We are one of the largest pediatric trauma programs in the country. And we have the distinction of being one of the very few that has both a level 1 pediatric trauma center and also a level 1 pediatric burn program in the country. Next slide. We also have, you know, as you can see, several specialized pediatric, you know, programs, you know, such as robotic program, pediatric program. You know, I am the director of the inflammatory bowel disease program. We have a colorectal program. And you can see Dr. Olutoye, who recently joined us about a year ago as our surgeon in chief. He's also a renowned fetal surgeon who is going to be helping us to start our fetal program. We're also actively recruiting for an abdominal transplant surgeon. Currently, our transplants are done by the transplant division at The Ohio State University. But we're actually in the process of staffing up to start our own transplant program at the Nationwide Children's Hospital. Next slide. You know, we are the #1 research funded program among US pediatric surgery training programs. And one of, I think we're probably the most funded division in the Department of Surgery. At Ohio State, which is very important again for you know, residents who choose to do pediatric surgery that may want to do research you know, within the department. Almost every year we have 2 to 3 of our residents who are doing research within the division of pediatric surgery. We currently have 2 of our residents doing research with us. Next slide. So this is our wall of fame. We have been training pediatric surgeons for since 1952. We just graduated our 82nd pediatric surgeon. Next slide. And in addition to our accredited pediatric surgery fellowship, we also have subspecialty fellowships in a variety of other areas. Next slide. But you know, what I really consider the crown jewel of our education program are the residency rotations. In red are the residency rotations for Ohio State. So if you come here, you are going to be joining us for 4 weeks as a PGY1, and then for 8 weeks as a PGY3. But we also receive residents from a variety of the community programs within our city, which are listed here. But for you, it's going to be 4 weeks as PGY1, and then 8 weeks as PGY3. And I think if you remember from Dr. Hasman's presentation, you are going to be well over the 50th percentile in terms of your cases. But if you are interested in pediatric surgery, we have a customized special rotation that we're going to give you as a PGY4, which is very important, if you're going to apply for pediatric surgery fellowship. Next slide. Because we're a very, very large program, and we do a ton of cases, as shown in this slide. Last year we did nearly 16,000 cases, pediatric general surgery cases. We have plenty of cases for our fellows. Our graduating pediatric surgery fellow this year graduated with, I think about 1,400 cases. He was only required to graduate with 800 cases, but he was able to graduate with 1,400 cases. And as you can see, our general surgery residents are graduating with more cases than they need. Dr. Drew, who is our match pediatric surgery resident, actually is going to graduate with more than I think 130 cases, pediatric surgery cases. So we have plenty of cases to go around, everybody. Next slide. This is a list of all the didactic conferences that we have in the department. The one listed here, the second to the bottom, the one that says Pediatric Surgery Review is actually a special conference that we hold for the rotating residents that is designed to prepare you guys for your oral boards exams. Next slide. Now, this is my favorite slide. This is the dashboard that I keep in my office to track the residents who go into pediatric surgery. When I started this dashboard in 2017, Dr. Huntington, to the far left, was the first resident since I became program director and since Dr. Hasman became program director that applied for pediatric surgery. He is now an assistant professor at Akron's Children's Hospital. And as you can see, since then, we have had a resident match every single year in pediatric surgery. The current intern class, we have 3 residents who have told me that they're interested in pediatric surgery. Next, can you click it? Just one more click. Okay, so this is the spot that is reserved for somebody in your year who may want to do pediatric surgery. So enough said. Next slide. So this is my information. If you want to talk about Ohio State or pediatric surgery, I'm also the vice chair for global surgery, and we have a great, unique Buckeye global surgery program here. If you want to talk about any of this, shoot me an email or send me a tweet. Thanks.
Thanks, Ben. Next up, Dr. Mira is going to talk about our skills lab and robotics curriculum. I talked briefly about robotics, and he knows a lot more, and he's going to talk about it some more.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us on a Friday evening. We appreciate you taking your time out of your busy schedules to spend a couple of hours with us and learn about the program. As Dr. Harsman mentioned, my name is Michael Mira. I'm one of the general surgeons, and my primary practice is at OSU East. I'm actually going to talk about that a little bit at the end of my 10-minute spiel as well. I want to take a moment to talk not only about our simulation and skills lab, but as well as our robotics curriculum, which we've developed for the residents, and something that we're very proud of. The first slide you see here is a sample of our skills lab curriculum, which we execute on a yearly basis. This is a living, breathing document. I actually dropped this into the slide for the presentation today for a couple of reasons. Number one, these are our skills lab curriculum through November 5th. This is a skills lab curriculum that I think a lot of general surgery residencies would be proud to have for an entire year, and this is just a snapshot of what we do in a 3-month period. Some exciting things you'll see here is, number one, we have a diverse group of individuals that are teaching and training, and each one of these individuals presenting are nationally renowned experts in their field. One of the other exciting things that we're doing this year is we're actually seeing a transition from our skills labs being animate pig models to actually a new preserved cadaveric model. And so that's something that we're excited to bring as we start to develop surgeons who are comfortable not only doing procedures, but doing procedures in anatomically correct and accurate models. And so that is something that we've partnered closely with the OSU Department of Anatomy, who is helping us with that. Next slide, please. And if you click one more time, Brittany. So one of the crown jewels of OSU and of our training program is the Clinical Skills Education and Assessment Center. What you'll see here in the images that are flashing through are images of the 6th floor of our health sciences library, which is immediately outside of the entrance to the main hospital. This represents 18,000 square feet of space that has a multitude of high technology simulators and equipment which we have available. We have a total of 4 virtual critical care and surgical bays with observation and control, which is what you're looking at now, where we host not only trauma and critical care experiences, but also simulate operative settings for surgical emergencies, including surgical fire, as well as laparoscopic skills and laparoscopic crisis. There's an ultrasound room, as well as a 70-seat seminar center where we do a tremendous amount of our training. This is just one of the places that we do simulation. We also have housing in across the street where we have our robotics laboratory, as well as a brand new center that's associated with one of our outpatient orthopedic centers where we're also able to do cadaveric training. The long story short being, we have a lot of opportunity for simulation and a lot of opportunity for you to hone your skills prior to being in the operating room. Next slide, please. As you may or may not be aware, and this seems to be something that feels far off to start considering now, but something that OSU is being proactive about, is the fundamentals of surgery. The first 2 on the left-hand side of your screens are actually requirements for you to graduate and sit for your general surgery boards. OSU's taken a proactive approach with this, and under the motivation and leadership of Dr. Kelly Hazley, who's one of our associate program directors, we are in the process of getting the FES and FLS modules completed during your PGY2 year. This is an exciting opportunity to, number one, get these out of the way, but number 2, have these skills honed so that as you move through your surgical rotations, that you're able to participate entirely in both the laparoscopic and endoscopic settings. FUSE is a electrosurgical safety module that's also been created by SAGES. I think the general consensus is this is something that will ultimately be brought into this trifecta and will likely be bringing into our simulation curriculum as well. Next slide. want to talk a little bit about resident certification for robotic training and our subsequent program. Next slide. This is, OSU has one of the busiest academic centers in the United States for robotic training, with our residents graduating with a tremendous number of cases. The way that we bring residents to the training certification is we first have our residents complete a series of online modules for both the SI and XI systems, which are the two systems that we have available here. These are things that you could start working on now, but that we have an expectation that all of our residents complete. Next slide. This is a snapshot from the website, but just an image of what those expectations are and the several classes that we have an expectation that you finish, with the intention being, as you start to move towards your simulation and into the operating room, that you're familiar with the technology and familiar with the system so that you can sit down and be competent when you're working. Next slide. Once those online modules are complete, this essentially buys you access to our simulator. We actually have several simulators on the robot that we have housed now. Most notably of those are the most recently released SimNow simulator. We actually have a dedicated console which sits in the walkway between the James Cancer Hospital and the University Hospital. This is accessible 24 hours a day to our surgical trainees, and the modules that we have expectations that you complete are available there. We're actually collaborating with the University of Alabama to develop a interinstitutional, almost competitive training model for these that we're hoping to roll out in the next several months. Next slide. This video that I hope is playing is an example of that SimNow training curriculum. Those were some of the gamified models, and then what you have here is actually dropping into procedural training. One of the most exciting aspects of this is that this simulator is the exact same console in which you sit down and operate on. So something exciting from that standpoint that we have access to and that you are that's integrated into your training. Next slide. Once all of these are done, trainees are also expected to bedside assist in a total of 5 cases, and then be able to sit down and start to operate under the tutelage of the surgeon of which they're working with. Next slide. All of our residents since implementation of our robotic program in 2017 have obtained intuitive certification. This is a document that essentially allows you to take a certification with you that imparts surgical knowledge and lends towards credentialing of our residents as they move through. Several of our residents who have completed residency and gone out into their own private practices and have been able to produce this and immediately start operating on the robot. One of the nice things about this, while this isn't an expectation of general surgery training at this time, it's definitely a direction in which we feel that OSU wants to be on the cutting edge of residency training. Next slide. This is Ekena, who you heard mentioned previously in the presentation as one of the pediatric surgeons. This is me having a conversation with him over text message during his 3 months of his surgical training, where he completed 117 robotic cases. And the vast majority of those in his last month, he was operating effectively independently at that junction. We were really proud of him. If you'll click once, Brittany. This is a screenshot that actually happened. And so nonetheless, we were really proud of him. And this is something that as an expectation as a pediatric surgeon, he has the opportunity to go and continue to kind of forge and take new technology into procedures. And we were incredibly proud of him for that. Next slide. Lastly, I'll talk real briefly about Ohio State, the Wexner Medical Center East Hospital. Next slide, please. OSU East is one more click, please, Brittany. OSU East is a university hospital 2 to 3 miles away from the main campus. What you're seeing here is an image of the emergency department, the operative tower, and the brand new ambulatory surgery center, which actually opened it and did its first cases today 4 brand new suites. This will primarily be interacting with some of our higher volume outpatient surgeries, as well as the robotics program, which we have at OSU East, which will be down on the 2nd floor. OSU East is universally regarded as one of the favorite rotations of the residents. We're always excited to have everyone over here. It currently stands as a PGY 2, a PGY 3, a PGY 4, and a PGY 5 rotation. There are a couple of ways that we interface with that with the endoscopy residents, as well as some of the vascular rotations. OSU East is also a level 3 trauma center, so you also get an experience with acute care surgery and trauma over here as well. With that, I believe that's the end of my portion of the presentation. Thank you so much. Happy to take questions additionally in the chat, and look forward to speaking with everybody during the interview season.
Thanks, Michael. Next up is Dr. El Hanawi to talk a little bit about didactics and transplant surgery.
Hi, welcome everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Briefly, I'll talk about didactics. I'll start by introducing the team that works in didactics. Next slide, please. So the program director and the associate program directors are mainly the leaders in the didactics work. We have one of the chief residents dedicated to work on didactics and help arranging the didactics for residents. We have a resident education committee. Those are residents from various levels of their training who meet on regular basis to discuss the progress of didactics, if there's any need for any change or modification or any additions. And we all in the department, all faculty and residents are really dedicated for education, and we all participate in the didactics. Next slide, please. The first half of the year, the didactic schedule is mainly done to prepare for the upsides. It's a weekly mandatory conference for all residents, and we make sure we get them free of all clinical activities on a half day where they have to go and do the didactics. One resident will be presenting and one attending will be assisting, and all other residents are participating. Currently, we are doing the SCORE curriculum, which is the Surgical Council of Resident Education curriculum. Next slide, please. After discussion with residents and leadership and the current situation with all virtual meetings, we decided the best way to go is by studying through questions. Next slide, please. So the didactics format for the first half of the year is high-yield questions submitted to the group by the residents who's going to prepare didactics. Big group of those questions are for individual study and independent studying, and around 20 to 30 questions will be discussed as a group through the virtual meeting. The residents will run the discussion and the questions, and one attending, you can see Dr. Pelouse here on the picture on the top, in the top picture. He's running the didactics about hernia, and it's really gaining a lot of excitement and involvement by the residents. Next slide, please. This is a schedule. This is an example of schedule of our didactics for this coming year. We cover all core subjects required by the SCORE curriculum. Next slide, please. The second half of the year, the main focus is on preparation for the oral boards. So again, it's weekly, the same time, same day, but the format changed to oral board scenarios to practice for oral boards. Next slide, please. And this is again another schedule for the second half of the year, how the topics that are discussed. Next slide, please. A few words about transplant. I'm one of the transplant surgeons. We are very proud of our transplant program. Next slide, please. Over the last year, really a lot of achievements. One of the most important things is how many funded grants we have in our division. We really have 3 of our surgeons are very focused on basic science research with their own labs, and during your professional development here in residency, you can spend time with them in their basic science lab. Another thing we are really proud of is our fellowship training. We have 3 fellows every 2 years, and we really have good interest from our local residents in transplant. Some of them match with us, some of them match in other really high caliber programs. Recently also, one of really things we are proud of is volume. Our volume is really huge. We rank the 3rd in the nation from abdominal organ transplant standpoint, which is liver, kidney, and pancreas. And overall, including thoracic transplants, we're number 5 in the country. So this really gives us a lot of volume and a lot of big experience to share with residents and fellows. And so there's really excellent communication between them in training, and there's no fighting for cases. There's plenty of cases for everybody. We even have rotators from outside hospitals who come join us for our training. Next slide, please. This shows like the volume by center across the country and based for all organ transplants. Next slide, please. And this is for abdominal organ transplants. And really, this is excellent achievement by Paul. Next slide, please. So the resident experience we have, residents rotate with us through the intern year and through the 4th year. In the intern year, you learn the principles of general surgery, how to, prepare patients to transplant, how you follow patients post-transplant, and some OR experience based on your level in like straightforward cases, liver transplants, kidney transplants, and procurement. The resident-fellow relationship, as I mentioned, is great. I mean, the fellows, really by a few months of their training, they become competent in almost all aspects of transplant, and they move during their 2nd year to the role of educating residents and junior fellows. I talked about the research a little bit. I mean, we really have robust clinical research. We have a lot of publications, and we always encourage residents to be involved in those publications. And as I said, the basic science lab and labs are also available for residents. With this, I'll finish my talk, and I'll be happy to have any questions in the question and answer, or you can email me or anytime. Thank you.
Thanks, Ash. Next up, Dr. Obengassi is going to talk a little bit about fellowships here and the surgical oncology experience, something that we get a lot of questions about, but I think it's a lot to know.
All right, so thank you very much for the opportunity to talk. As Dr. Harsman said, my name is Samilia Obengassi, and I'm a breast surgical oncologist within the Division of Surgical Oncology. Next slide. So I'm briefly going to talk about some of the fellowships that we have available here at The Ohio State University. We have fellowships in abdominal transplant surgery, cardiothoracic surgery, colorectal surgery, and also pediatric surgery. Next slide. We also have pediatric surgical critical care, and as Dr. Nwome showed you guys, we actually have a lot of other fellowships that I did not put on the slide. We have adult surgical critical care, surgical oncology, and also vascular surgery. Next slide. And we also have something called assistant professorships, which are equivalent to fellowships. And we have 2 of these, which include advanced therapeutic endoscopy and gastrointestinal surgery, and also minimally invasive and bariatric surgery. And the reason why I took the time to list all these fellowships is that I wanted you to be aware that there are multiple opportunities to continue your education here at The Ohio State University once you complete your general surgery training. So one of the big questions that we typically get when a program such as ours has such a robust number of fellowships are, how do fellows and residents interface? Next slide. Next slide. And so really the goals of fellow resident teaching are to ensure that both parties, meaning that residents, fellows, and actually I would say 3 parties and medical students all have an optimized clinical experience and also all have equitable operative exposure. Next slide. And the way that we've operationalized that is to really think of fellows as educators. So as a junior residents, meaning, excuse me, I have a mild cough, meaning first or second year residents, the way to really view fellows is to think of them akin to GAs or TAs when you were an undergraduate. If you remember from that time, those individuals served as sort of intermediaries between yourself and the professor, and mostly served as educators for you in that they were able to help explain course material, and also sometimes in certain universities will work with you in the lab. And so you can think of fellows in that same vein, in that they are here to also serve as intermediaries between yourself and the attending, but also to serve as adjuncts to your teaching. And what fellows can do, and what fellows do is that they can enhance your clinical knowledge acquisition, meaning that they can teach you a lot about clinical decision-making as they have recently graduated from a program themselves. Also, studies have shown that programs such as ours that have a lot of fellowships tend to have higher board pass rates. And then also fellows can be very useful in terms of improving operative experience and autonomy. So I think some of my colleagues have described some of these experiences where with some of the fellows, they may be able to walk you through simple surgical procedures under the supervision of an attending, or for complex procedures may start the procedure with you, and then once it gets to the more complicated parts of the procedure, their attending may then step in and work with the both of you. So really one of the ways to view fellows is to view them as adjuncts or as individuals who are going to help in terms of your learning. Next slide. And the way that we've conceptualized and operationalized this in the Division of Surgical Oncology is with the apprenticeship model. And the apprenticeship model is exactly as it sounds. As most of you probably know, an apprentice is somebody who works with a tradesman, like a carpenter, to learn a skill set for a low wage. We will give you some money as a resident, but it's not going to be as low as a tradesman will get, but it's not, it's not a significantly high salary. And so with that concept in mind, with the apprentice, what you do is that you work closely with this individual to learn a skill set. And then once you have completed your training, you take this skill set and then you start a business of your own. And so in the Division of Surgical Oncology, we have that same concept where surgical oncology is a broad specialty. And so what we've done is that we've broken down the rotations by organ site. Next slide. And then within each of these organ sites, depending on the size of the faculty, we've broken it down even further to allow you to have a much more, I don't want to use the word intimate, but a closer relationship in terms of how you work with your attendings. We feel that this approach enables you as a learner to focus more on your clinical decision-making and also focus a little bit more on your operative skills. As some of you already know and will discover as you train, training as a surgeon, one of the things that you will notice is that although there are key steps in a procedure, all surgeons and most surgeons have what I call surgical idiosyncrasies, which are different ways of doing parts of the procedure. And when you work with a large group of attendings, sometimes as a junior level resident, you become very entrenched or focused on these surgical idiosyncrasies. And that sometimes prevents you from being able to get the big picture and really being able to integrate your clinical decision-making and clinical information with the operative procedure. So by reducing the number of attendings that you work with and just focusing on a few attendings, we feel that this strategy enables you to really focus on the operative technique, really focus on clinical decision-making. And also we believe that by working closely with the faculty, you'll get some autonomy a little bit earlier as they'll be used to working with you. And so they'll be much more likely to relinquish some of the operative steps to you earlier on in your training. Next step. And so really the way to sort of conceptualize fellows and residents working together is that at the junior level, as I mentioned earlier, fellows function more as graduate assistants or teaching assistants, where they help you in terms of patient care. So patient care meaning both the inpatient and the outpatient setting. They also can help you in terms of your operative technique. And most importantly, what we do is that they can also provide you with some feedback while you're on a rotation. Now, as you become more senior, the relationship with the fellow transitions from one where they're more of a educator to one where you become co-chiefs or co-leaders. And even in that relationship, there are still opportunities for the fellows to serve as an educator, as they may have more clinical and operative experience than you do. Now, because we have such a large service and because we also have a fellowship ourselves, one of the things that we do to try to make sure that the fellows are functioning in the capacity that I've outlined is that we meet with the residents during the midway point of the rotation to have a discussion with them about their patient care, about their operative exposure, and more importantly, about how they're interfacing with the fellows and how we can improve upon that relationship. On the other side, we also meet with the fellows to make sure that their learning goals and objectives are being met and that the resident-fellow relationship is also working from their perspectives. And my slides are very brief, so that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them at the end of the presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Oben-Jessie. Appreciate that. Next is Dr. Pollock, our chair, to talk a little bit about his view of the department and life in Columbus.
Great. Thanks, Alan. Thanks, everyone. It's really fantastic to join all of you today. And I love hearing myself just about the department and all the wonderful faculty and residents and programs that we have to offer. So I'm super excited to be here with you today, and I'm very excited to be part of the Ohio State. Next slide. So it's super exciting to be here at Ohio State. You know, as one of the largest universities in the entire country, we have so much to offer. We are a very large medical system. We have 7 of the interprofessional health sciences present on campus, everything from nursing to pharmacy to vet school to our medical school, School of Public Health. All of that is situated within the same footprint as the undergraduate campus. So there's an incredible amount of resources here at Ohio State. And I frequently say that I have literally never really say that, oh, we don't have that here at Ohio State, or, well, you're interested in that, well, there's no one here that I could find for you. No, it's really, everything's here at your fingertips, and the resources and the possibilities here are really endless. If you look at the overall strategic plan for the university, you can see that one of the main pillars of the strategic plan is our academic health center. So the medical center features very prominently into the lifeblood of the entire university. And we have very much as our focus to remain as a premier academic medical center in a premier academic department of surgery. Next slide. Something that's also very important to me is our values in the Department of Surgery. And if you were to come here in person, which unfortunately, because of the current situation, it's not feasible, but if indeed you did come here personally, you would see outside of the elevators when you come onto the administrative floor, our Buckeye values displayed prominently. And it's important to me that we cultivate a culture and environment here that's inclusive, empathic, and sincere, in which people can really strive and thrive to reach their full potential, where we can also cultivate other values such as determination, ownership, and innovation. So, you know, I think what you would find here is a group of people who work very hard, who are very accomplished, yet are also very genuine and very nice, and create an environment where one can thrive not only professionally, but also personally. Next slide. The other thing that's very exciting is that we are already a very large medical center, and you heard about that from the prior speakers. We have not only a significant breadth, we have a marked depth. And what I mean by that is that each of our divisions, and you heard about transplant being the 3rd busiest transplant program in the country. Well, we could say that similarly about our colorectal program, our surgical oncology program, our vascular program. I could go on and on down the line, abdominal core, bariatrics. All of our different service lines are very busy. So if you came here, you would have the opportunity to rotate on many different services that are led by clinical leaders who are well known nationally in their field, and be exposed to a great complexity of cases and a great volume of cases. And to continue to accomplish this moving into the future, we're excited that there are a number of capital campaigns that are underway Here you can see a schematic of our current footprint for our main campus. And the James is our cancer hospital, which is the third largest cancer hospital by bed in the country. We have our Heart Hospital, which is a dedicated cardiovascular hospital in the Ross Heart Facility. And then Rose and Doan are our current university hospital, if you will. We are in the process of starting the build of a new clinical tower. And this facility, next slide, will be over 800 beds. And you can see here in this schematic again, here is the James, and this new structure will be larger than the James and will be connected to the James and house brand new ORs, ICUs, burn center, helicopter pad, and really state-of-the-art facilities. This is slated to probably open in late 2025 or 2026. So probably during the time that you would be here, and you would probably be operating in this facility perhaps as chief residence or maybe PGY5. So I think this is very exciting. We are also opening up several ambulatory surgical facilities around the Beltway in Columbus. So I think that's what this shows you, is that we are an exciting, dynamic medical center that is on the upswings and growing more. We're not contracting. We're not even steady. We're in the growth mode, and you would be the beneficiary of that if you were to come here to train. Next slide. The other thing that I really want to impress on you is how great Columbus is. I had never stepped a foot in Columbus in my life until I looked at this job. So I am not someone who's a homer, so to speak. I'm not from the Midwest. I love Columbus. Columbus is quote unquote a real city. There's well over 1 million people that live in Columbus and the metropolitan area. It has a very vibrant population. It has a broad economic base that has finance, has fashion, food industry, health industry, insurance industry. So it's really a dynamic area with lots of different people. It's very ethnically diverse and racially diverse. Has a large LGBTQ community here in Columbus. It's just really a very vibrant, diverse, wonderful place to live. Next slide. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Columbus, I really implore you that you hop online and get to learn about our city a little bit more. Frequently people come and they love our program and they love everything we have to offer, and they just feel like, gosh, I just don't know that much about Columbus. But I'm telling you, it is phenomenal. It's big, it's affordable. If you want to live in an urban setting, that's open for you. If you want to live in a more suburban setting, there's great suburban areas. It's accessible. It's located, very close to many other cities. We have a great airport. So if you want to get to other places in the country where you may be coming from, you can get there. And it really is a microcosm of America. Lots of products that come to market are first tested here because it's such a diverse, vibrant city with a population that is young and middle age, if you will, that it serves as a great place for different companies to test market. And it's also, it's a smart city. It's very plugged in. It's very social media savvy. And also has a large number of colleges in the area, so there's a vibrancy to the city. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, unfortunately, you won't be able to see or really experience everything that we have to offer, but these are just some different pictures that you can perhaps check out online, whether it's our vibrant food market, the North Market, whether it's Short North that has a number of bars and really phenomenal restaurants, whether it's Nationwide Arena. I'm a big hockey fan, and the Blue Jackets, which is an NHL team, unfortunately was just eliminated by Tampa Bay the other day, but still I've gone to multiple hockey games there. It's phenomenal. Concerts are there. We have a professional AAA baseball team and the Clippers, which is phenomenal. I'm a big baseball fan. It's a great place to see a game. We have, amazing nationally acclaimed museums, Science Museum, Art Museum, Veterans Museum, just a really great place to live. Next slide. And I think that's important because, you want to go to a place where you're going to, work hard, yet it's going to be a city that's going to offer you lots of things to do for your time outside the hospital, either with your friends or with your family or significant others. And Columbus really has a lot to offer. Next slide. So I'm just going to end on a couple slides. Another thing I frequently saying is that, we may not be a unicorn. I don't think we're suggesting today that there's not other programs out there like us. But I think we may be a Siberian tiger or something else that's pretty rare. I mean, I do not think there are many programs, surgical programs, that have what we have to offer. Number 5 in NIH or research with robust research opportunities for the residents and health services research, basic science research, education, and now a quality track that has the clinical programs that we have with one of the busiest robotic programs in all of the country, with the sheer volume of cases that we have, with the 3rd largest cancer hospital, the 3rd busiest transplant program, and then has a global surgery program that allows our residents to experience surgical rotations in Sydney, Australia, or in Africa, and then does this all within the context, next slide, of a really welcoming environment that is characterized by a genuine Buckeye spirit and a real collegiality amongst faculty and residents. There is definitely something special about being a Buckeye. People love being here. And I think that is super important. I always say I have a smile on my face when I come into work in the morning, and I have a smile on my face when I'm driving home at night, because, Columbus is a great place to live, and the Ohio State is a great place to work. And I am convinced that you saw that today through the great presentations of our faculty and some of the residents that were online. And so I strongly encourage you to give our program serious consideration. And I know that all of us would be willing to talk with you one-on-one or respond to any emails. I will put my cell phone number and my email address in the chat room, and you should feel free to contact me at any time. So again, thank you so much for spending your time with us today. And as always, I'll end with Go Bucks.
Thank you, Dr. Pollack. So we're going to have, I know a lot of applicants want to talk to residents, and I absolutely endorse that idea. But as you can see, we had a solid 2 hours of our faculty being excited about our program, much less adding time to talk with the residents. So we've split the two things up a little bit, and we'll be having a happy hour on Sunday the 30th at 5:30. As I mentioned, we've been doing these since COVID started. And this particular week, we're going to set aside to talk with you all. We'll have registration go out that week so that we avoid some of our early spam friends that we had on this call, and also get a little information about you so that we can match you up with residents in smaller chat rooms and whatnot on Zoom. If you have any other questions, we'd be happy to answer them in the Q&A now. I know we're run right up to our time. Also, we'd be happy to take your emails. Our email address is there. As I said, I'm the program director, and Brittany Campbell, who's also been on the call and running our slides for us today and doing a great job, is our program manager, and be happy to answer questions as well. There's one question in the Q&A about IMG cutoffs. We typically ask that international grads have a year of clinical experience in the United States at another program. Generally, we stick with that. Sometimes we do make some exceptions. We don't have any particular cutoffs for IMGs. Obviously, there are a lot of qualified graduates from around the world, and so it's not necessarily easy to get into the program as an international grad, but we do have at least 3 people I can think of offhand. Paco Guzman, who I think someone chatted with earlier in the chat is on the line here and doing a great job as a chief resident, and a couple guys who are third years now, who are doing a tremendous job. So no, there's no specific cutoff. Well, with that, well, thank you all for attending. Thank you all to all of our, also to all of our faculty who participated in a great job presenting our program. I hope you all have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
All right. Thank you all. Great job.
Hey, Alan.